the part of the session on art and activism and select forms of organizing as I've said, and Christina is basically a cultural practitioner based in London with an interdisciplinary background, and she's going to talk about the idea or notion of dual power and mutual aid. And as far as I've understood, the project is underpinned by a decolonial approach or perspective. And then we move on to Yanis. Yanis Signoroglu. I hope I pronounce your last name correctly. And yeah, I think the title of your presentation is very, very promising. I heard it through the grapevine. And yeah, I think you tell us more about a project in which you have been involved as a member of an art collective based in Greece. And eventually we then listen to Kimberly's presentation. As I've already said briefly, Kimberly is based in Victoria in Canada. She's a PhD student, but at the same time, she's also an activist and an artist, and she's going to talk about collaborative art in the practice of community activism. But I would say one thing at a time. So if you are ready, I would now like to hand over to you. I would like to ask everyone to mute their microphone during the presentation. So Thomas is joining us as well, I should see. And then, yeah, Christina, you have got 15 minutes, or if you need a few more minutes longer, this is absolutely fine. And then we have got another 10 to 15 minutes for discussion comments on your talk. Okay? So may I just hand over to you, Christina, please?
Christina, are you here?
She was a moment ago, yeah.
Yes, she was here a moment ago, and meanwhile, I'm getting the presentation ready for her.
Exactly, that's what you do. Thank you, Ozan.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So is it all right, okay, Christina?
Perfect, thank you very much. So I'm going to be talking about cultural activism as dual power. This presentation draws from a paper. It was an article that I published a few months ago called The Great Post-Decolonial Approach of Life Beyond Neoliberalism. I was asked that since it had been published, that it would be nice to expand on it and link it to my work and to cultural activism, reason why I end up in this section of arts activism. So yeah, if we could go to the next slide, please. Can we go to next slide, please?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you. So the content that it's going to be covering is the context, COVID-19 global pandemic, and how do we go from mutual aid to dual power. Then I'll be extending on dual power, and I'll be wrapping up on cultural activism as dual power. Next, please. Next, please. Sorry, I need to say for the people attending that someone else is managing the presentation for me, so that's why at the end of every slide I need to ask to move forward. So I wanted to open the talk with this statement. Sorry, can we go back?
Sorry. Of course, no worries.
So I wanted to open with this statement from architect, system theorist, and futurist Buckminster Fuller, who said that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Next, please. Next, please.
It is already, I already did. Sometimes there might be a slight delay, so it's coming.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. Can you see now? It's all of our grievances are connected.
I just saw it now. I'm very sorry about that. So yes, jumping into the context of the COVID-19 global pandemic, if the pandemic has brought up something, is that all of our grievances are connected. Next, please. And then it has also brought up, as in reminding us of 3 global key existential questions. The first one is, if we want to rebuild a broken system, which is literally killing us on a perpetual pandemic basis. The second is, if we can build a new paradigm with what Audre Lorde called the same tools of the old master's house. And the third one is, if not, then how do we transcend them? Next, please. So just jumping right into the developing on the pandemic bit as a context. Probably the most the most significant thing of the pandemic is that it's been like a historically unique chance to ask ourselves simultaneously what is truly important to us on a personal and collective level, and what activities are essential to our social and natural well-being, and what is it that we depend on when our lives are in a clearer manner under threat, because before the pandemic they were already under threat, but it's just been brought to our attention. And if we have proved something, is that we can show up in solidarity for each other, self-organizing outside of structures, institutionalized structures that had basically failed in the process. So that's when mutual aid stepped up. Mutual aid are systems that commoners have always stepped up with when the state, market, or monarchy failed to provide basic needs in a state of emergency. And that solidarity is not just volunteering altruism. It's actually a decentralized practice of reciprocal care based on communal well-being, and is well the commanding political basis of autonomous solidarity in that transformed that relationship. Next, please. So how is that transition from mutual aid to dual power? Well, mutual aid has been, I think, known by most of us, but it's just the beginning, since history is full of community-rooted participatory politics emerging out of a crisis, which embody radical mutual aid. Like, for example, the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, ACT UP, or Occupy Wall Street. And today, various decolonial and abolitionist formations have been established involving mutual aid adjusting to the present crisis. And they are just mobilizing these informal networks in more deliberate ways, understanding the legacy of this past mutual aid, which taught us that political self-determination is not possible without economic self-determination. And those are things that have been very well understood by, for example, the American Woodbine or the British Corporation Town, which are claiming spaces for food sovereignty. So developing on dual power, just to define what dual power is, dual power is the process of creating collective counter power, organizing society in parallel to the status quo. So it's a framework where popular power is built outside of governing institutions to challenge and displace them through truly democratic ones, becoming the new structure of a liberated society. It's a strategy rather than an ideology, and can be used to advance a variety of forms of social change. However, the advantages of the strategy make it most compatible with perspectives that emphasize the exercise of power at the community level, that seek to make the revolutionary movement accountable to the people, and seek decentralized forms of power as the key to personal and social freedom. That is grassroots dual power, and it's the bottom-up transformation and gradual replacement of the mechanisms of society. Next, please. So in practical terms, this does not necessarily mean disengaging with existing institutions. Jade McKee from Occupy describes dual power as an approach that can be forging alliances and supporting demands on existing institutions like, for example, universities, museums, or workplaces, but while at the same time developing self-organized counter-institutions. One example is Symbiosis, which is a continental confederation of grassroots institutions and movements building dual power at the moment in the States, but willing to grow. And their movements building dual power towards a directly democratic and ecological society from the ground up. The organizers state that in early stages, crafting an alternative political infrastructure is local, but community organizations are designed to be organized as a network, and that's a key word here. And that by working together and mutually reinforcing one another, these institutions can be also changing the power relations of a city or neighborhood and lay the groundwork for a future civil society. Next, please.
I already did. It should come through.
Okay, for some reason it's delayed on my side. Thank you, Ozan. Yeah, so just wrapping up on dual power. They also state that through engineering new institutions of their own, communities can cultivate a creative and communal spirit that will empower them to take control of their lives, connect to one another across cultural and geographic distances, and gradually develop egalitarian foundations of a new society. And well, they give here like a more detailed description of what a libertarian eco-socialist type of society would look like. Next, please. And then wrapping up on how cultural activism fits in this dual power strategy. Defining cultural activism is defined as a set of creative practices and activities which challenge dominant interpretations and constructions of the world, while presenting alternative socio-political and spatial imaginaries in ways which challenge relationships between art, politics, participation, and spectatorship. As you know, is otherwise known as social practice art, participatory art, relational art, dialogical art, community art, or art activism, and it focuses on community engagement and social discourse. Artists working in this social practice co-create the work with a specific audience or propose critical interventions within existing social systems to explore hierarchies, to inspire debate and to catalyze social change. They're more preoccupied with the process than a finished result, as in a product object, and they're meant to inspire, to drive, and in some instances to just trigger change individually and collectively. Cultural activism scope then generates both critical education and action at both levels, and can lead to social movements embodying, in any case, self-organized non-governmental politics. And as a practice, it acts as a catalyst that can work on a local, national, or international level. And that's why it's part of this liminal transitory space called dual power, where communities are mobilizing counter power at different degrees and stages. It's true that cultural activism, I mean, depending on the project, is not always going to be, I mean, I was saying earlier that it's very important to mind that to be the political self-determination is not possible without economical self-determination. So cultural activist projects are not always focused on an economical level, but they're always focused on a re-educational level. So that's why I emphasize here that it's at different degrees and stages, because that's still a stage of that counter-power movement. And then, which is very important, is that the success of these mobilizations, so they do not get stuck in the realm of the symbolic, especially when they are not independent, as in funded publicly, is creating networks of localized counterpower that feed and support each other if aspiring to that gradual replacement. And when I say funded publicly, what I mean is that these projects can still be impactful, but really relying on a well-thought design of the project itself, and they often entail limitations. One example is Counterspace Zone. Is the first decolonial think tank mapping cultural activism worldwide. Shaped by the phases of the decolonial process, it has an unlearning toolkit proposing resources and experiences to unpack and redefine, so far consisting of online and printed decolonial publications, a decolonial library, decolonial labs, and forum talks. And the relearning toolkit proposes resources and experiences to reconnect holistically, so far consisting of a radical imagination library, mutation school, which is like a holistic school, mutants podcast interviewing cultural activists around the world, and a cultural activism global directory and network, which can be browsed by continent, by artistic discipline and social construct, as in different types of oppression. And it's a Joseph Beuys-inspired social sculpture organism network, which by connecting the dots, links all these experiences and culture shakers, whether they are artists, creators, or both, creatively decolonizing culture, while also inspiring others to join this collective machinery towards change. And as a net, as he defined it, I mean, it's a net where, as he defined it, every human being is an artist who shapes his, her, their state of freedom, and where the position of freedom, where everybody experience at first hand, the position of freedom that everybody experiences at first hand, learn to determine the other positions of the total artwork of this future social order. In the next slide, we have a visual. This is like a clearer image with a visual diagram of the cultural strategy of Counterspace, which basically takes art as a source directed to individual communities and institutions, and then it shows the unlearning toolkit with the relearning toolkit inside of what it would be a new collective knowledge pool. I always say that it's an organic pool, because it grows as we do, with different proposals, and it's all working within a decolonial and holistic approach, exploring horizontal relationships, and learning and relearning personal and community development, and self-organizing. So just wrapping up the whole presentation, as a reminder of the purpose of all this work, after having experienced a global collapse, but not only because all those things were things that were already happening and important before, it's just that we've been reminded of it. It becomes clear is that the choices between totalitarian abuse and citizen empowerment, between life in common in eco-social terms and neoliberal fantasies of unlimited growth and tightly integrated global markets, enslaving and dividing us by different layers of oppression and privilege, between life-affirming and death-affirming organizations, and between breakdown and breakthrough. we can go to the next slide, please. So as a summary of the main points, the first one is that we are living an unprecedented time, which provides us with a communally unprecedented opportunity. Because if all those truths were truth before now, what is happening is that on a global level, we understand that we're more understanding of the common ground that link us all. The second one is that the main function of oppression is to limit our imagination, and facing a life-threatening broken system, mutual aid is not only necessary, but just the beginning towards dual power as transition to a new paradigm. And the last one is that cultural activism is one of the main forms of dual power in terms of re-education, and these mobilizations gain counter-power strength when functioning as networks. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christina. Thank you. Christina, in case you have got a camera, it would be great if you could turn it on.
Yeah. Great idea, yeah.
Maybe make it a little bit more kind of interactive and lively as well. That would be great. Thanks a lot. Very good. So I think, yeah, we have got 10 minutes for questions, comments, and who wants to make a start? Any comments or feedback for Christina? Yeah, and you can also use the chat function if you prefer. And I see we have got already a first comment. Stephen Shukaitis, he's actually also a former member of Ephemera and now an affiliate, asks whether you think that dual power as a concept can easily shake off its roots as a Leninist theorist approach, because you briefly referred to that body or approach. And then Stephen adds, I'd like to think so, but it seems it might be worthwhile to think through tensions between self-organization and Lenin.
Okay, I would like to clarify that the origins of the concept, I mean, the first time that the concept was used was Lenin using that concept, but then that concept evolved, and it shouldn't be associated just to Lenin's philosophy or politics or ideas. And that's why I was pointing out that that is nowadays is probably referred more as counter power than dual power, because dual power really links to Lenin. But counter power is a very similar idea, which does not necessarily need to be associated to Lenin or his ideas. As I said, it serves a variety of social change purposes. They don't need to be communist or socialist, or it's just that if it's better to with ideas that are focused on a community, a grassroots level, and also pursuing a decentralized form of politics. So it would be, in any case, probably a libertarian one. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Christina. That's actually a helpful clarification. I think I had a similar thought as well, whether you understand these counter sides as standing outside of power, but at the same time, you also mentioned that in certain ways they are also related and engage with more traditional institutions. Have you got any other comments or reflections on that first presentation? We have another comment in the chat.
And there's a hand, I guess, Bernadette. Alessandro raised a hand.
And there is a hand. So Alessandro, I suggest you go first, please. Thanks, Ozan, and then we can look at the comments, Matthew. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Christina, thank you, Ozan, thank you, Bernadette, for this very interesting presentation. So, Christina, really, I was super inspired by your presentation. So, thank you very much. This is simply great. So, I'm just thinking, because you challenged me. Is it possible also, in your opinion, to have dual power within democratic institutions? So I approach more from Elinor Ostrom type of takes. So I'm intrigued by ideas of deliberative democracy and co-production. So I'm aware that it could be still a Western biased type of democratic governance, but with this in mind, and of course with all its limitations, would it be possible, in your opinion, to have this kind of dual power within the state, rather than having a counterpower outside the state?
The thing is that the whole goal of exercising counterpower is to escape the state. So, and that's why I've been giving references to the new paradigm, because because of many references that I gave, as well as in, can we really change things with the within the same paradigm or with the same tools of the old master house, like Otherlord said in his book, or if we are really looking to decolonize and to be organized in a and to be looking forward a paradigm shift, we need a completely new thing. So no, me personally, I do not believe. I mean, to me, it's like kind of incompatible idea to. I mean, what would be the counterpower about if you want to remain where you are? The counterpower is to challenge societies which, even under the label of democratic, are not democratic, to pursue a truly democratic model, which, to be truly democratic, in my opinion, should be then a direct democracy. Then options are many. This is like an area where options are many, options are to debate, options. What I'm convinced about is that this change will never happen within the system, and that is on us to figure out how to design a new one. And this is just like a proposal of a strategy of transitioning towards it. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah. Christina, I wonder whether you would actually like also to respond to Matthew's comment that we have got in the chat. It relates quite nicely to this thought and discussion, I think. So Matthew is saying there's arguably been a move away from some of these ideas in recent years back to a more traditional electoral politics. Ideally, that might help the duality, but is there a risk that the radical terrain shifts away from mutual aid and focuses its energy on capturing the state?
Capturing state? What do you mean?
Capturing the state.
I don't understand what does he mean by that.
Matthew, I wonder whether you want to come in and elaborate a little bit. If you want, please do so.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
So I guess I mean that the position that you've just been arguing against, the kind of working within the master's house, there's arguably a sense that a lot of radical politics are moving back to that position, to trying to capture the Democratic Party or the Labour Party, or to set up radical political parties like Syriza or Podemos, for example. So that's what I mean by kind of capturing the state. So using the more traditional methods that we kind of think of in terms of revolutionary power or radical power. Arguably, that kind of discourse is becoming more prominent than it has been for the last 20 years or so.
Do you mean that the current nation states can appropriate the language, or?
Yeah, I suppose so. But I guess so some of the examples you point to, some like Occupy, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Occupy hasn't really existed for 10 years, and what I see is a lot of the energy that was focused on things like Occupy and had more of a semblance of articulating a vision of dual power that you've articulated. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of that energy now going back to more conventional forms of party politics. So I suppose my question is, do you see that
so you mean
trajectory that, in the way that I've outlined it?
Well, no, I don't see it. But it's true that many of these movements are kind of short-lived. I mean, in quotes, many, last 4 years. But I mean, it's not an easy work, but I think that's the spirit of all. I mean, everything that they have in common, and all these movements. Whether we're talking about the Black Panthers or Occupy or other projects happening now, like for example, Cooperation Town or Wood Vine. Like the spirit is the same, and I think that's the direction we need to aim for. Then why they? I mean. I think that, I guess, in practice, there are many things to take into consideration, and things go as far as many different life circumstances allow to. But I don't think that people would be, if you will, fighting or sacrificing or doing that much and that far with the aim of being captured in the same thing that they want to escape from, because there's a reason why, there is a conviction why that's necessary. And then also going back to what I was saying in the beginning, what I think is that yes, the mainstream politics, of course, they're gonna be appropriating whatever they need to for their propaganda. It's starting from the very basic common of democracy. What kind of I mean, I don't want to be sounding as if I'm doing propaganda myself, but I on a very personal level, for example, I'm Spanish. I come from Spain. I was born in 1981 in democracy. However, that happened only 6 years after the death of Franco. So this is just an example of how unreliable mainstream politics are. Like, I know, as a matter of fact, that my country was and is not living on in a true democracy. Is living on a post-transition dictatorial time with lots of dictatorial hangover, which is reflected in many ways, and yeah, this is just like an example, for example.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for commenting and asking. And I'm sorry, I think we probably have to move on. I just suggest a book now, in case you don't know it. Can you see it? The Ethics of Dissensus by Eva Ziarek, Postmodernity, Feminism and the Politics of Radical Democracy. that could kind of, just contribute a little bit in case you're kind of still developing also your project and thinking, because she forwards an idea of, non-oppositional power, in the sense that power and resistance and these new forms, alternative forms, of being, living, organizing are not necessarily oppositional. The ethics of dissensus, really interesting read, I think. But thank you very much, Christina. And I suggest, and I hope that is fine for everyone else, that we now move on to the second presentation by Yannis. I heard it through the grapevine, so yeah, very much looking forward to your talk, Yannis.
Just a second to share my paper.
Yes, please do so.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I would really like to share my enthusiasm for being part of this thought-provoking online gathering. I find it really important to mention that this conference functioned as a chance to reconsider commons and cross-level participation as cultural, civil, social, and political values. Some introduction about me. My name is Yannis Signoroglu. I'm from Athens, Greece. I'm a visual artist and spatial theoretician. I studied fine arts and methodology in architectural research. And currently I'm a PhD candidate at the National Technical University of Athens, Department of Architecture. Since 2011, I am a founding member of Campus Novel Artist Collective. Campus Novel focuses on several aspects of the archaeology of the present as part of a retrospective process seeking for alternative meaning contents. Our practice encompasses elements from different fields in order to suggest a dialectic form based on interdisciplinary perspectives, free from any pre-allocated construct. My contribution draws upon the documentation of I Heard It Through the Grapevine, a long-lasting context-specific project initiated by Campus Novel. The project places emphasis in wine and winemaking as an attempt to bring up issues of cultural, anthropological, financial, and political significances such as collective identity, community ethics, small-scale production, migration law, home economy, agriculture, labor mobility, site consciousness, and urban planning. There is no particular reason to doubt that the discourse on community is one of the consequences on the extended precarity in the post-war prosperity societies. Serge Latouche speaks of a society of frugal abundance, entering the idea of degrowth as a way to recontextualize phantasmagorical worries that run across the economic and political misinterpretations. Winemaking, in the historical perspective, can be regarded as a factor of community formation with strong bonds to earth and agricultural heritage. Mesogia is an area on the east of Athens with a remarkable tradition in winemaking. Its vicinity to the city of Athens permitted families with a permanent residency in the city to own a small vineyard in Mesogia and make their own small-scale domestic wine production. Some among our group members share the experience of the vintage in Mesogia, performed by the family and friends in a mood of regressive, joyful contact with nature and agriculture. Certain changes in the European border legislation in the beginning of the 90s brought about a flow of immigrants that would get illegally employed under extremely low wages, which contributed to some extent to the creation of the Greek myth of prosperity of the 90s. This also signaled a change of paradigm for the aforementioned domestic winemaking. Locals would rather employ seasonal workers than keep up with the traditional and relational practice. In the same time, the area underwent rapid and unplanned urbanization. Well, these part collective and part personal narratives are among the issues that we tried to explore throughout a performative relational study. Over a year, we paid often visits to Mesoia, where in close contact with locals, winemakers and laborers, recorded the vintage, produced and bottled 60 liters of our own Savatiano wine. The project was actually oriented in 3 parts. First part, the reenactment. In this stage, as already mentioned, we performed the whole wine-making process from the harvest to the maturation state, following certain routines and rituals. I'm referring to various tasks who had to respond from the proper cut of the grapes to the preparation of the barrel we were going to use. Considering the fact that we did not want to have any professional backup and also that we had no training, skills or previous experience, the whole attempt seemed precarious and uncertain. At that point, we addressed to locals, family members, friends and home-scale producers. Pretty soon a micro-network of people took form and gave us all the support we need. It is no coincidence that all this recorded conversation on practical issues became after a while a relational storytelling, tracing of what becomes remote in reference to a proposed futurity. The second part had the form of a workshop, a temporary art laboratory on design, branding and genealogies. The workshop attempted a projection on the ideologies of the origin through the relation of winemaking and family tradition. The participants of the workshop were called to design, edit and present through a handcraft and inventive process of sketching, texting and homemade printing each one of the labels that could be attached to the 40 different bottles of wine that we managed to litter. Having constant feedback, footage material, field recordings, etc. from our experience, they managed to have an idiosyncratic approach blended with personal narratives and came up with unique pieces. The third part of the project, transumerism, can be described as a performative festive event, a relational experience of tasting the wine with friends, partners and visitors as a gesture of offering and sharing. In our inventive scenario, we call all the members of the certain participatory event by the term transumers. Transumer is actually a neologism, a new term invented to define the new type of consumer, those who consume experiences instead of products and goods. The social, economic and political consequences of this new trend have already triggered much debate in the global market. I would like to mention here that the project, I heard it through the grapevine, was hosted at the Omonia Athens Biennale 2015-17. Thank you very much for your attendance. I should open my camera.
That's great. Thanks a lot. I'm sure I'm not the only one now kind of feeling a bit of a longing for the wine that you have produced, but let's imagine we would have had the opportunity, to taste it together. But yeah, thanks very much. And again, I want to open the floor and ask you who wants to share any ideas, reflections, or has got questions for Yanis with the project he just presented. Can I then maybe ask Yanis, could you just explicate a bit more what exactly was the objective of this project? Was it the wine making itself? You also addressed questions around, community formation. There was also a bit of critique in terms of the myth around it, the traditions, etc. So maybe you could just clarify a little bit what was exactly, the main objectives of your project?
Yeah, the truth is that considering that we have to make we use the word we, speaking from on behalf of Campus Novel group, and any kind of statement is in a level of metaphors or parables. I mean, it's an inventive way of mentioning or making a statement about commons or about traditions. It's actually a different kind of critique between all this ideological value system on traditions and ethics and families, and that makes somehow ideologies that they move in a scale of phantasmagoria and mythical thing. And this kind of a reactment with the wine, where first of all it was a totally performative thing to do, but from one part it was this commentary willing of traditions and origins and all these things, and the other part was how these things are in a bigger frame of branding or consuming, or another scale, how people use these as tools of communication or stereotypes forms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Yanis. Yeah, that's helpful.
Thank you very much.
Just briefly, that makes me think of another paper by a colleague called Beverland. I'm not sure whether you have come across this paper. It was published in JMS, Journal of Management Studies. Not that I think that this is such a super exciting journal, but the article could be of interest because from what I remember, they explored the French luxury wine industry. And they focused also on how those particular types of wines are branded, and more specifically, the angle is storytelling. And what they basically argue is that kind of the stories they create is all about exactly, you know, tradition, artisan, production, etc., the heritage, and so on. But then they basically say that this is very widely decoupled from the very concrete production processes and practices. And they also kind of basically say that, yeah, they hide, you know, the commercial orientation and the industrial character also of the wine production in this particular context and setting. So, yeah, maybe that's just something.
I'm not actually aware of it, but I can imagine because it's, you know, this Mediterranean thing you can find from localities or topical things to how can they relate together and they communicate with what we call the public sphere exchanges.
May I ask a quick question, just following up that? It was really interesting, Yanis. I wonder what is the current situation in the project right now, and whether do you collaborate with some other food activists in the region? Is there a kind of exchange of practices or some future collaboration or synergy opportunities?
Look, this was we don't actually have a certain strategy with the goods or food or wine or something like this. I mean, this was a certain project with typical worries of the campus novel group. I mean, all this thing about how to relate different perspectives and different things, not just fields of knowledge, and how can you make them function or not. This is the main target of the group. Somehow the state of being an amateur, where there's actually a semiology on campus novel, because I mean you're always in a state that you're not an expert. So somehow, as I already mentioned, we had no idea of how to produce wine. Actually, we had the same anxiety about. Well, actually, we didn't care about the wine, but it was more of the process of something that is related to the land, or and with the things that were not used to be involved. It was a challenge after all.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you very much.
Thanks again.
And for all the support. Well, I would really like to mention that my presentation had the form of, well, I had in mind this format of a photo essay, more like a photo essay thing. So this is why I follow this structure in my presentation.
Thank you, Yanis.
Thank you.
Had a good sense of the whole process and project. There would be time for another question or comment. Would anyone else like to come in?
I see some comment about luxury wines.
Exactly,
Sorry.
this was actually just the title of the paper that I have mentioned.
Ah, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Maybe we are still processing. This is fine. So Yanis, you anyway still around and with us, right, this afternoon and tomorrow. So you can also get in touch with him directly.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for the support and not only the technical part. Thank you very much. I think guys you're great.
Excellent. And by the way, it might be that we run an Ephemera conference in Greece, in the northern part of Greece, later this year, in December actually. Also on the comments and what is the title? Also, maybe you may remember.
Agroecology, I guess.
I think so, exactly.
This
so
is the one that's supposed to happen the previous year and it was cancelled?
Yes.
The Jamaica thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Yes.
Me too. Somewhere in the Greek mountains, right, in the northern part.
Yeah. I hope. Well, sorry if I take time. If we're out of context now, but I have already had a submission for the actual Ephemera conference. So I would gladly. I would be very happy to participate to that in Jamaica. Yes.
Even better. That's really nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again. So then we can actually move on to the final presentation in this session by Kimberly Crosswell. As I've said, unfortunately, she can't be here with us, but she kindly agreed to pre-record her talk. And basically she will share lots of kind of impressions and give us examples of her own art practice. But she's not only an artist and activist, but she's also an academic in becoming, is currently completing her PhD on art and how art can actually also be a catalyst for what she refers to environmental and social justice. So we're looking forward to her presentation, and then there is still we've still got a few minutes for comments, questions, because she actually will also listen to the recording then. And if you haven't got comments, you can also still kind of reach out to her and write to her. At the very end, I've seen that she also has added her contact details.
Yes. And just want to add, Bernadette, she couldn't make it because of the time zones difference. Yeah. She's not in the available time zone. That's why she sent kindly her presentation.
Absolutely fine. Yeah, I think she wrote it was 4 o'clock, 4 a.m. at her. So this is, yeah.
Okay.
Understanding. Okay, so will you share it then, Ozan? That's great.
Yes, you can see, right?
Yes, you shared your screen, but not the presentation.
In a cultural environment that heroicizes artistic individualism, collaborative arts activism, taken to challenge the status quo, necessitates asking questions about and developing processes to create social...
Yes, you do not see the video, or you do not see the recording.
We don't see we hear her voice, but actually we don't see the presentation.
That's weird, because I'm using the main... Okay, let me try again, please.
You try again, otherwise I try. I have got it as well. It's still trial and error. Sorry, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. So you probably, how about now?
Much better. Here we are.
Okay, let me check whether the sound is also coming. I'll do it.
Thanks for your understanding. Okay.
In a cultural environment that heroicizes artistic individualism, collaborative arts activism, taken to challenge the status quo, necessitates asking questions about and developing processes to create socially and politically engaging art. Rather than promoting a singular individualistic artist identity, the bid to become a creative collaborator producing arts activism necessitates the development of new collective purposes for creativity, to establish sites of resistance, to educate through collective inspiration, cooperation, and shared leadership. I pursue my acts of creativity with a threefold purpose: to educate, inspire, and empower others to enact social change. In time, my art practice evolved from producing objects to developing social institutions, enhancing collective autonomy, creativity, resistance, and anarchist prefiguration politics. That last two, resistance and prefiguration politics, intertwine. Resistance engages in symbolic and direct actions against oppression. These actions must be nurtured within sites of resistance. Prefigurative politics is generally defined as the practice of envisioning social change by merging the means of change with the ends desired. However, the prefigurative politics I practice is less about envisioning and more about taking action to build sites of resistance in the form of alternative anarchist institutions. Opposition to injustice is a powerful factor in defining the world we want to see, but it must be lived as much as it is fought for. Sustaining sites of resistance, we nurture cultures of resistance that infuse both constructive and oppositional creative activities. My story begins with the responsibility to situate myself. My name is Kimberly Croswell. I am a settler living in Victoria, Canada, on unceded Lekwungen-speaking territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt peoples. As an aside, I would like to clarify that unceded means there have never been any formal treaties signed between the colonizers and the local Indigenous peoples. Even where treaties exist, the settlers have broken them, and so lands under treaty should also be considered unceded. Ongoing sites of resistance I participate in are the annual Victoria Anarchist Book Fair and Camas Books and Info Shop. These two sites contribute to the creation of a culture of resistance, as I shall narrate. The Info Shop and the Book Fair were both founded in 2007. Here I am showing you the first book fair poster, designed by Indigenous anarchist sovereigntist Gord Hill, a Kwakwaka'wakw artist, writer, and activist, whose critical interventions are resounding. I am also showing an interior shot of the original Camas Books and Info Shop. The info shop is volunteer-run and was founded on anti-colonial values, with many of its collective members identifying as anarchists. It takes its name from the camas flower, which is harvested as a root vegetable by the Lekwungen-speaking people on whose territories we are situated on. Today, I will share a story of arts activism and resistance to the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics, which is relevant in light of mass opposition to this summer's Olympics in Tokyo. Why oppose the Olympics? The Olympics movement is a fundamentally corrupt institution that wastes billions of public dollars on nationalistic, jingoistic games. Every Olympic bid perpetuates ongoing injustices, including economic inequality, colonization, poverty, policing, gentrification, and ecocide. In Tokyo, by insisting the Olympics push ahead despite a worldwide pandemic, the Games place nationalistic pride and business profits over the well-being of many. In my region, opposition to the Games was galvanized on March 6, 2007, when a group of Indigenous warriors abducted a huge Olympic flag from Vancouver City Hall. The Warrior Society claimed this act in honor of Harriet Nahani, an elder from the Pachidat Nation who had been incarcerated for 2 weeks for protesting the expansion of a highway to an Olympic site. Whilst in jail, Nahani was very sick and left untreated. Shortly after she was released, she contracted pneumonia and died. The communique attached to this photo ended with an anti-colonial rallying cry that was taken up by anti-Olympic activists across Canada. No Olympics on stolen native land. After this point, activist actions mushroomed. Indie media campaigns went into action, workshops about the untold history and social costs of the Olympic Games sprung up, and multiple banners and images were disseminated. The most iconic image was this 2008 poster produced by Gord Hill for the Olympic Resistance Network. In my community, activists began organizing against the Olympics in late 2008. Our meetings took place every 2 weeks and were open to the public. Camas Books provided us with a venue. In Victoria, our anti-Olympics target was the Olympics torch relay kickoff celebrations, which were scheduled to start in our city on October 30th, 2009. No 2010 Victoria decided this would be our focal point. The Olympic torch relay is a tradition begun by Nazi Germany for the 1933 Olympic Games to celebrate fascism. By targeting the torch relay, we demonstrated our opposition to the Games' promotion of nationalistic ideals. In support of the effort, the 2009 Victoria Anarchist Book Fair focused on mobilization. Once again, Kwakwakiwak artist Gord Hill designed our galvanizing poster. At the 2009 Book Fair, No 2010 Victoria debuted a collaboratively designed free speech zone propaganda t-shirt and bandana ensemble. The t-shirt referenced government attempts to corral anti-Olympic protesters into so-called free speech zones in violation of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In response, No 2010 Victoria declared the entire country a free speech zone. The t-shirt reinforced that fact every time someone put it on. And thanks to art like this, No 2010 Victoria won the media war on the issue of free speech. On October 30th, 2009, we staged our event in 2 parts. First, we had a 5-ring circus rally at Centennial Square. Then we set off on a zombie march to greet the torch. Art was a key educational weapon in our activist toolkit. It inspired risk-taking on the part of those who were prepared for it. The circus featured a satirical anti-Olympic torchbearer wearing a collaboratively designed jumpsuit, mask, and carrying a toilet plunger torch. Our torchbearer was accompanied by a wild rumpus marching band playing New Orleans free flow jazz, a series of parodic mascots, plus a giant puppet. The circus included theatrical parody sporting events, such as the Binner's Garbage Barrel Race, featuring participants who make a living from gathering recyclable materials. Other events included a low-income housing relay race, a queer wrestling match, and a deep aerobics Olympics resistance warm-up. When the 5-ring circus rally ended, the zombie march got underway. During 3 hours of chanting, playing music, and marching in the rain, the zombies successfully disrupted the torch relay, forcing officials to temporarily douse the torch in the face of protests. Then, after the dousing, the marchers traversed the city to greet the opening celebrations, where they drowned out the festivities with their shouts, chants, and musical instruments. The anti-torch relay action was a huge success. A key member of the zombie march was my co-created giant ghost salmon puppet, which represented government collusion with the Norwegian fish farming industry along the migration paths of the wild salmon. In August 2009, the salmon run in the Fraser River, one of the largest wild salmon rivers in British Columbia, collapsed, and our puppet called attention to the disaster. Preparing for the Vancouver Olympic Games opening, my collaborator, Nancy the blacksmith, and I, along with numerous volunteers, decided to create another salmon. The second salmon was much bigger. Its head was mounted on a baby carriage, and it required 5 people to drive it. Nancy devised the frame in movable parts, while I designed the pattern of the skin, sewed it, and coordinated the puppetistas. The puppet was christened Mia, an Indigenous name for salmon, by Heiltsuk activist Mary Vickers. This puppet made its debut as part of the huge anti-Olympics protests which converged on Vancouver Stadium, where the Olympic opening ceremonies were held on February 12, 2010. After the Vancouver Olympics, Mia appeared at many rallies and protests. It was marched through the streets first and foremost in solidarity with Indigenous peoples whose traditional way of life depends on the wild salmon, but also made notable appearances in protests targeting bitumen and frack gas pipelines, and the port expansion intended to expedite greater fossil fuel shipping from these pipelines. In 2013, the puppet was gifted to Mary Vickers of the Heiltsuk Nation, the activist who first named Mia, and was on the ground at most of the protests featuring the giant salmon. During the anti-Olympic protests of 2010, which called attention to a host of injustices the Canadian government was trying to sweep under the carpet, I began to formulate my ideals about non-hierarchical shared leadership and put them into practice. Here I am showing anarcho-Indigenous sovereigntist and activist artist Gord Hill, whom I have mentioned a few times already. Gord Hill is a leader in the anarchist grassroots community whose critical art and publications have served as timely interventions and shaped discourses within our milieu. His role in the anti-Olympics movement provided us with inspiration and critical analysis as we planned our actions. The anti-Olympics movement was decentralized and anti-hierarchical. Groups formed large coalitions in which leadership was a position of responsibility towards others. Coordinating a march on the streets, for example, required planning that focused equally upon making an impact while making space for the inclusion of a diversity of participants, no matter what age or abilities. In the aftermath of providing a venue for the anti-Olympics protesters to meet and organize, Camus Books was raided by the Victoria Police on a spurious mission to lay mischief charges. This speaks for itself concerning Camus Books' status as an important site of resistance. I joined the collective immediately following the raid because I realized what a valuable anti-authoritarian institution Camus Books and InfoShop is in our community, and I wanted to support it. When I get together with others to create and enliven protest through art, I am striving to enact the social systems I want to see around me. I want to live according to the values of mutual aid, sharing responsibility, and collaborative leadership with everyone's well-being in mind. One of my grounding principles regarding the anarchist conception of leadership is novelist Ursula K. Le Guin's insightful observation that an anarchist is one who, choosing, accepts the responsibility of choice. In short, Le Guin underlines that actions have consequences and that changing the world for the better is premised on taking responsibility for your decisions. No one is an island. We must always be mindful of how our actions impact on each other, society, and the earth we share. What this means is that taking the leadership involves stepping into a web of relationships. It's an expression of love for others and the world around us. It involves commitment and a willingness to sometimes challenge people to change their assumptions and their way of doing things. It is also a challenge to oneself to exemplify the sort of change one wants to see in the world. In the process of developing shared leadership, it is important to be mindful of the things you are fighting against and the things you are fighting for. Leadership dedicated to realizing social change assumes a double duty: to concurrently oppose systems of social oppression while also creating the foundations of the society we want. Organizing a vigil or march is important because it situates our resistance. But these practices should be coupled with institutional prefigurations to sustain and grow communities. A lot of people think anarchism means there are no leaders, but actually it means there are many leaders who are collaborating, learning from each other and sharing responsibilities. This impacts on our practices in a number of ways. Internally, it informs our consensus-based decision-making process, which respects experience and degrees of responsibility. Externally, we conceive of ourselves as collaborators and our relationships as transformative. In other words, we don't do things on behalf of others. We work together. The social architecture that emerges from this process is a solid foundation for affinity building practices, which are crucial for making an impact. Affinity refers to the unifying ties that connect participants across differences within a given project. Affinity is not imposed by an authority or agent. It emerges organically from within an organization or group as an ongoing participatory process of renewal. Affinity-based activism offers a different model for social change, in which leadership is mentorship, not a relationship of domination over others, but one of shared learning and understanding. Leadership emerges as individuals assume responsibilities to complete tasks, and we ask each other for help if needed to share in the responsibility. Sharing responsibilities is the foundation of the sort of prefigurative politics that I am interested in modeling within the structures of contributing to anarchist institution building. It is through the shared leadership of many contributors, collaborating in good faith and in dedication to a material project, that sites of resistance can be sustained and remain resilient even in the face of repression. Shared leadership is context dependent. While some initiatives emerge spontaneously, others develop relationally over time. Together, sharing leadership in communities allows for the growth of institutional sites of resistance. The Victoria Anarchist Book Fair and Camas Books and Info Shop are two important examples of anarchist institutional prefiguration politics in action, which in turn support the emergence of creative artistic practices necessary to instill cultures of resistance, both prefigurative and protest-oriented. During this time of COVID, the book fair temporarily went online in 2020, and we are still in the process of determining the event's format for 2021. As for Camas Books, the info shop has never been stronger. It has grown immensely through community support and volunteer participation since we came out of the first COVID lockdown a year ago. Thank you everyone for listening. I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to the conference organizers for supporting my inclusion through video recording. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to correspond through my contact here. creatrix@riseup.net.
Thank you, Kimberly. I think that worked very well, I have to say. Very interesting and rich presentation. Excellent. Would still anyone like to comment, share reflections? We have still got a few minutes if you want. Or otherwise, really use the opportunity to also get in touch with her directly. I'm sure she appreciates comments and feedback. I mean, what just came to mind is that, yeah, Ephemera has also been present at one of these anarchist book fairs a few years ago in Europe, in Stockholm. So this is a really interesting parallel, I would say. And of course, I also had to think about the special issue that Ephemera edited a few years ago on management, business and anarchism, I think. This is the title in 2014. And Thomas Swan is actually one of the editors of this special issue, and he will also present, I think, this after. So in case Kimberly doesn't know the issue, maybe you want to look at it, and maybe that's also of interest to anyone else Yeah. No? Okay, Ozan, so how do you feel? Shall we then just call this a first session, a very interesting session on arts, activism, particular collective forms of artistic activism as well, forms of artistic organizing. In a way, I think the three papers and presentations here related very nicely to each other. Christina also addressed some aspects of participatory forms of artistic organizing, and so did Kimberly now in her talk. And yeah, I also, we only had 2 sessions now, but it was already very rich, and maybe we can come back to some of, our ideas, reflections, then also tomorrow when we have the final panel. And I see there is a comment in the chat. Let's just see. Anarchism is not a lack of leader, but many leaders in collaboration. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Christina, for your comment. That's interesting and relates also, to this idea of shared responsibility, I think, that Kimberly has put forward. Thank you. So then, yeah, thanks again very much, Christina. Thank you, Yannis, also for your presentation and insights. And thanks again, Kimberly. And yeah, she will then also listen to the session because we have recorded it.
Thank you very much.
I see. Thank you. Ozan, would you like to add something, or is it just time for a comfort break?
No, I think it might be a really good moment for a break, and we can get ready also for the other sessions. I hope everyone has access to the links for the other sessions, because each meeting or each session has its own kind of link. So if you can just follow the link for the specific session, then probably we will see each other there.
1:15, right? We continue. So we've got the 15 minutes break.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thanks again, everyone, for contributing, and see you in a bit then.
Yeah. Thanks, Bernadette, for a wonderful chair.
Very welcome. See you later.
Bye for the moment.
Thank you. Bye now. Bye-bye.